Delayed sword. Direction. Front. Attack. Right lapel grab. Technique. 1. While standing naturally, step back with your left foot towards 6 o'clock into a right neutral bow stance facing 12 o'clock, while simultaneously executing a right inward block to the right inner wrist of your opponent. At the same time, position your left hand at solar plexus level as a precautionary check against further action. Your block should clear your opponent's right arm and expose the width of his body. 2. Immediately slide your right foot back into a cat stance. 3. Without hesitation, deliver a right front snap ball kick to your opponent's groin. Your opponent's reaction should cause him to bend forward at the waist. 4. Plant your right foot forward into a right neutral bow, facing 12 o'clock, to check your opponent's right knee, as you deliver a right outward handsword strike to the right side of your opponent's neck. Remember to maintain the position of your left hand as a precautionary check. Immediately slide your right hand, after the strike, to the right wrist of your opponent as a precautionary check. Your opponent's response should cause him to fall to the ground. Sword of destruction. Direction. Front. Attack. Left roundhouse punch to the head. 1. While standing naturally, step back with your left foot towards 6 o'clock into a right neutral bow stance, facing 12 o'clock, as you simultaneously execute a right extended outward block to the inner forearm of your opponent's left punch. Your left hand should be in a positional check, covering your solar plexus. 2. Immediately slide your right foot back into a cat stance. 3. Without hesitation, deliver a right front snap ball kick to your opponent's groin. Your kick should cause your opponent to bend forward at the waist. 4. Plant your right foot forward inside of your opponent's left leg into a right neutral bow, facing 12 o'clock, and while employing marriage of gravity, execute a right inward handsword strike to the left side of your opponent's neck. Such action should cause your opponent to fall to the ground. 5. Immediately snap your right hand back to the left shoulder of your opponent to act as a check. Alternating maces. Direction. Front. Attack. Two-hand chest push. 1. While standing naturally, and as your opponent attempts to push you, step back with your left foot towards 6 o'clock into a right neutral bow stance, facing 12 o'clock. Simultaneously execute a right inward block to the outside of your opponent's left arm, while your left hand checks at your solar plexus. This action should turn the width of your opponent's body and redirect his forward momentum off center. 2. Immediately collapse your right arm across the top of both of your opponent's arms, to act as a check, as you deliver a left vertical thrust punch, tracking over your right arm, to your opponent's sternum or solar plexus. This is done while pivoting into a right forward bow stance. Remember, both the stance change and punch must work in synchronization with each other in order to maximize the force of your left vertical thrust punch. Your opponent's reaction should cause his body to bend forward at the waist. 3. Immediately convert your left punch into a check by having it shift, palm open and down, on top of both your opponent's arms. Simultaneously have your right hand rapidly travel inside and over your left arm as you deliver a right outward back knuckle strike to your opponent's right temple. This transition is done while pivoting back into a right neutral bow stance. The torque stemming from your stance change helps to increase the whipping action of your right hand. Properly executed, this should cause your opponent's head to be driven up and back, with perhaps his arms flailing upward. 4. Immediately have your right hand snap back, as it then acts as a positional check. Deflecting hammer. Direction. Front. Attack. Right thrusting ball kick to groin. 1. While standing naturally, step back with your left foot towards 7:30 into a right neutral bow stance, to move out of your opponent's line of attack, as you simultaneously execute a right downward diagonal block against the outside of your opponent's right kicking leg. Be sure to have your left hand check at your solar plexus during your block. Your opponent's body should turn slightly to his left when your block is properly executed. Your block should additionally turn your opponent's width and cause injury to his leg. 2. Without hesitation, and while still in your right neutral bow, shuffle forward as your left hand checks inward, toward and between your opponent's right shoulder and biceps. Your right hand continues to circle and it will reorbit into an inward elbow strike. Make sure your left hand checks your opponent's forward momentum as well as the width of his upper body. 3. Just as you conclude your forward shuffle, execute a right inward horizontal elbow strike to your opponent's face. This is done simultaneously with a left sliding check down and onto your opponent's right elbow. Your action should cause your opponent's head to snap back and possibly have your opponent drop to the ground. Captured twigs. Direction. Rear. Attack. Bear hug around waist, with arms pinned. 1. While standing naturally, with your opponent's arms around your arms, step off and to your left toward 9 o'clock with your left foot into a horse stance, while looking over your right shoulder, as you simultaneously pin your opponent's hand to your body with your left hand. Just as your weight settles into your horse stance, execute a right backhammer fist strike to your opponent's groin. This action should cause your opponent to bend forward at the waist and possibly release his grasp. 2. Immediately slide your right foot into a right cat stance, turning 90 degrees while facing 3 o'clock, as your left hand releases the pin, clears your opponent's right arm, and covers in front of your face as a positional check. Simultaneous with the action of your left arm, have your right hand cover your groin and proceed to clear your opponent's left arm. 3. Execute a right heel stomp to your opponent's left instep, causing your opponent to bend forward even further. 4. Slide your right foot back toward 3 o'clock into a horse stance. Immediately have your right forearm contour up the middle of your opponent's body as you execute a right vertical obscure elbow strike to the underside of your opponent's chin. Have your right arm snap back after the strike and cover your groin. Your opponent's head should have been popped up and back, and his body may also spiral away from you if done properly. The grasp of death. Direction. Left flank. Attack. Right headlock. 1. With your head forced to bend forward and your opponent to your left flank, applying a headlock with his right arm, initiate your action by tucking your chin to the left and against your chest, as you grab your opponent's right wrist with your right hand. All of this is done as your right foot steps toward 12 o'clock into a right close kneel stance while simultaneously grabbing your opponent's right inner thigh with your left hand and pinching, crab hand pinch, the flesh of that leg with as much strength as possible. Your opponent will experience a horsebite effect if it is done correctly. Be sure you continue checking the outside of your opponent's right leg with your left knee. Your opponent's right knee may bend and double up, or his leg may pop forward and up off the ground. In addition, your efforts should cause your opponent to loosen his grip. 2. As your opponent reacts to your pinch and partially or totally releases his grip, have your right hand bring his right arm over your head and down to your chest, making sure that your right elbow is anchored to aid you in controlling your opponent's height zones. 3. Immediately release the grip of your left hand, and have your left foot step forward toward 10:30 into a left neutral bow stance as you simultaneously strike the back of your opponent's right elbow with your left forearm while pulling in and toward you with your right hand. This action should cause your opponent to step forward with his left foot prior to bending over at the waist. 4. Roll your left forearm on the back of your opponent's right elbow until your left forearm is parallel to the ground. Now strike your left hand to your opponent's right elbow. While controlling your opponent's right elbow with your left hand, pivot into a left forward bow, facing 10:30. As you pivot, execute a right snapping vertical punch to the base of your opponent's skull, behind his right mastoid bone. This action should cause your opponent's head to move away, and possibly followed by his body falling to the ground. Checking the storm. Direction. Front. Attack. Right overhead club attack. 1. While standing naturally, as your opponent swings his club in an overhead fashion, quickly step off to your right with your right foot toward 3 o'clock. Simultaneously drag your left foot toward your right foot as you form a left 45-degree cat stance facing 10:30. Without a break in the flow of your action, execute a left extended outward handsword block to the inner wrist of your opponent's right arm. During the natural flow of your motion, have your right hand precede your left hand as a right parry, executed in the manner of a right inward block, that stops, hand open, to act as a check in front of your solar plexus. 2. Immediately execute a left front snapball kick to your opponent's groin. This should cause your opponent to bend forward at the waist. 3. Plant your left foot toward 10 o'clock. Be sure to properly gauge the distance between you and your opponent, as you deliver a right snapping knife edge kick to the inside of your opponent's right knee. Your action should cause your opponent's right knee to bend out and away from you, but cause his head to move closer to you. 4. Plant your right foot toward 10 o'clock into a right neutral bow, and while employing marriage of gravity, execute a right outward back knuckle strike to your opponent's left temple, as your left hand remains checking at your solar plexus. This action should drive your opponent's head away from you and possibly cause his body to drop to the ground. Mace of aggression. Direction. Front. Attack. Two-handed lapel grab. 1. While standing naturally, with your opponent grabbing your lapel with both of his hands, while pulling you in and toward him, execute a right stomp on the arch of your opponent's right foot. Simultaneously strike diagonally through the bridge of your opponent's nose, toward 1030, with a right inward-downward raking back knuckle strike. Have your left hand pin and check both of your opponent's hands to your chest at the same time the stomp and strike are taking place. Your opponent's knee should buckle from the stomp as your back knuckle strike breaks his nose and momentarily drives his head away. 2. Continue the motion of your right arm so that it travels horizontally and down, striking both of your opponent's forearms which, in turn, will force your opponent to bend forward. 3. Immediately execute a right inward horizontal elbow strike to the left side of your opponent's jaw, making sure that you follow through with your action. This will turn your opponent's head to his right. 4. Without hesitation, return with a right outward horizontal elbow strike to the right side of your opponent's jaw. This will force your opponent away from you. Attacking mace. Direction. Front. Attack. Right straight punch to face. 1. With your feet together, drop back with your right foot towards 6 o'clock into a left neutral bow stance, facing 12 o'clock, as you execute a left inward block to the outside of your opponent's right punch. During this action, your right hand cocks forward and slightly to the right of your solar plexus, fist clenched and palm up. You are turning the width of your opponent's body. 2. Immediately pivot into a left forward bow stance as you execute a right straight thrust punch to the right lower ribcage of your opponent. Make sure that your left hand is open as it checks your opponent's right elbow. Your action should cause your opponent to bend forward at the waist and to be forced back slightly. 3. Circle your right hand down, out, over and around your opponent's right arm as you countergrab the outside of your opponent's right wrist. Immediately pull your opponent's arm diagonally down past your right hip while simultaneously delivering a right roundhouse kick to his groin. During this action, cock your left hand slightly above your left ribcage, fist clenched and palm up. Your kick and pull should cause your opponent to bend forward even further, thus exposing his right kidney. 4. Drop forward into a right forward bow toward 12 o'clock, while simultaneously executing a left snapping vertical punch to your opponent's right kidney, with your right leg on and over the line of entry. Make sure your right knee is inside of your opponent's right knee and pressing up against it. Your punch combined with your buckle will drop your opponent to the ground as well as move him away from you. Sword and hammer. Direction. Right flank. Attack. Left hand shoulder grab. 1. While standing naturally, facing 12 o'clock, your opponent, standing between 3 and 4 o'clock, grabs your right shoulder with his left hand. Step off into your right with your right foot toward 3 o'clock into a horse stance, with your head and eyes turned toward your opponent, while striking your opponent's throat with a right outward handsword. Simultaneous with this action, pin your opponent's left hand to your right shoulder with your left hand. This action should cause your opponent's head to move away from you. 2. As your opponent reacts to your handsword strike and bends backward, execute a right backhammer fist strike to your opponent's groin. Your opponent should then bend forward at the waist. Blocking set 1. Start from a meditative horse stance facing 12 o'clock. 1. Execute a right upward block. 2. Leaving your hand as the focal point, execute a right inward block. 3. From the inside, rotate at the shoulder and execute a right extended outward block. 4. From there, circle it down counterclockwise and execute a right outward downward block. 5. Chamber the arm executing a right back elbow. 6. Execute a right push down block. Repeat on the opposite side, using the same sequence of blocks with the left arm. Salute. Feet together. Bow. Note. The concepts focused on in this set are those of point of origin. In other words, you do not have to rechamber to execute another block. You can instantly and quickly turn one block into another. Try to imagine a star as you do this. Short form 1. Opening. Attention stance. Drop to a meditating horse stance. Come up to attention stance. Signify, execute the salutation, then return to a meditating horse and conclude with your head up and eyes open. Note. All blocks in this form are accompanied with a back elbow strike. 1. Your left foot drops back, toward 6 o'clock, into a right neutral bow facing 12 o'clock, while executing a right inward block toward 12 o'clock. 2. Your right foot drops back, to 6 o'clock, into a left neutral bow facing 12 o'clock, while executing a left inward block toward 12 o'clock. 3. Cover, by moving your right foot toward 12 o'clock, pivoting into a left neutral bow facing 9 o'clock, while delivering a left outward block toward 9 o'clock. 4. Your left foot drops back toward 3 o'clock, into a right neutral bow facing 9 o'clock, while executing a right outward block toward 9 o'clock. 5. Cover, by moving your right foot toward 6 o'clock, pivoting into a left neutral bow facing 3 o'clock, while executing a left upward block toward 3 o'clock. 6. Your left foot drops back toward 9 o'clock, into a right neutral bow facing 3 o'clock, while executing a right upward block toward 3 o'clock. 7. Cover, by moving your left foot toward 3 o'clock, pivoting into a right neutral bow facing 6 o'clock, while executing a right downward block toward 6 o'clock. 8. Your right foot drops back toward 12 o'clock, into a left neutral bow facing 6 o'clock, while executing a left downward block toward 6 o'clock. 9. Cover, by having your left foot drag to your right foot and out toward 9 o'clock, into a meditating horse stance, facing 12 o'clock. Come to attention. Execute the full salutation and bow.